All right, let's dive straight into the digital firestorm, shall we? The demo for Project 11A dropped, and wow.
Wow, that's right.
If the Indian gaming internet is anything to go by, I mean, especially looking at Indian gaming, even spilling over into Uri, India, things are. Well, let's just say people have opinions. Strong ones.
That's putting it mildly, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just the public forums, is it? Those WhatsApp audio messages you shared, they gave a really interesting sort of unfiltered peek behind the curtain.
Exactly. And, there was hype, 8 months of development, Varun Maya and his team, like 40 people promising to set the bar for Indian games.
An open world game, Unreal Engine, the ambition was definitely there,
Totally. But you've been waiting through all the reactions. What's the general feeling you're getting?
honestly. Mostly it's a pretty big wave of disappointment.
That's what we're digging into today, right? What this
Mm.
early feedback really means for the scene over there.
Yeah, what are the main complaints? And what does it tell us, maybe, about what comes next? So let's get into it. The negativity. Indian gaming just seemed to, well, explode almost as soon as that demo hit.
Yeah, I saw that. Where do we even start?
Well, one of the first big posts, really detailed, was from Cyberboys the 7. They didn't hold back.
Okay.
They were saying they hoped for something maybe more innovative, indie-spirited, like you mentioned, Black Myth, Wukong.
Right.
But instead, it felt like a retread. They compared it to Mumbai Gullies Part 2 and Unsung Empires, the Colas.
Ooh, that says a lot about perceived originality, doesn't it? Like same setting, different coat of paint.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the critique wasn't just superficial. They brought up some really specific technical stuff, like starting with Unreal Engine itself.
Oh, yeah. What about it?
The point was, look, optimizing Unreal well, that takes a really skilled team. So that immediately raised flags about performance.
That makes sense. I've dabbled a bit in optimization, especially open world stuff. It's a beast, even for seasoned teams.
It's a massive hurdle. Unreal gives you amazing visuals, sure, but you
Yeah.
got to know memory management, rendering pipelines, all that jazz,
Yeah.
especially for open world.
Right.
And Cyberboy 7 also said the 3D assets look stiff. They even wondered if maybe AI was used, with some human touch-ups.
Stiff assets. Okay. That can really pull you out of the experience.
Definitely. And it didn't end there. Combat system. Super boring, they said.
Oh.
And overall, for an Unreal game, even with Lumen lighting potentially being used, it just lacked anything truly remarkable.
So the whole package just didn't land.
Pretty much. The feeling was it didn't live up to the hype, which led them to this pretty downbeat conclusion about Indian game dev maybe stagnating.
Wow. Okay. And that kind of kicked off a wider discussion, didn't it?
It really did. A big theme that kept popping up, someone called Hurt Juice mentioned this, was this idea of Indian devs always aiming for AAA.
Right. The AAA dream.
But, as they put it, with peanuts and resources. It raises that fundamental question. Is the ambition out of whack with the reality of budgets and team size?
Yeah. And equivalent bat 3941 chimed in to define AAA, right? Like we're talking tens, hundreds of millions sometimes.
Yeah.
Big teams, years of development.
Exactly. Which makes that claim of 8 months with 40 people, well, it puts it in perspective.
It really does. Makes you wonder if expectations were set realistically from the start.
It feels like a disconnect.
Hmm.
People want cool, big games, sure. But the feedback, it suggests maybe they want something else more. Like Right Delay 3503 suggested focusing on great gameplay, even in, say, a 2D platformer.
Gameplay over graphics, basically.
Yeah, make it fun, make it polished. That should be priority one.
And that idea seemed popular. People were worried, weren't they? Like Aquila Real and Agramaying.
Yeah, worried about the reputation. Like releasing something seen as subpar could hurt everyone. It might scare off investors, make them think it's too risky.
That's a fair point. A rising tide lifts all boats, but a sinking one.
Exactly. And Aquila Real was pretty blunt about it. Said Indian gamers play global titles. They won't just accept inferior crap because it's local.
Ouch. But, I mean, true. Players have high standards everywhere now. The quality bar is just global.
It is. And the complaints weren't just technical. Shady Karen brought up something interesting, this feeling that maybe too many Indian games lean on mythology and epics.
Oh, interesting point. Like defaulting to the Ramayana or Mahabharata.
Yeah, they wanted more original stories, fresh mechanics. Question why it always seems to go back to those narratives.
It's a tricky one, though, isn't it? That mythology is so rich.
Totally. And Black Phoenix X20 made that point, using Black Myth, Wukong, as an example. Mythology can work brilliantly.
If it's done well, with real talent and creativity.
Right. It's about the execution, the originality you bring to it, not just the source material itself.
Makes sense. Then there were the direct game comparisons, the whole GTA but India thing.
Yeah, that came up a lot. And Iansev said, look, seeing your city in 3D is cool for 5 minutes, but if the game itself isn't fun.
The novelty wears off fast. It needs that solid gameplay loop.
Exactly. And the visuals themselves got picked apart, too.
Yeah.
Hornimus mentioned inconsistent art style,
How so?
like maybe some really detailed textures next to kind of low-poly models, or generic Unreal effects that didn't quite fit. It breaks the immersion when it doesn't look cohesive.
Yeah, that visual disconnect can be jarring. Some of the descriptions were pretty brutal, though.
They were. Nexisticosco said it looked like a mobile game with slightly better graphics.
Wow.
And Cool Appearance 351 just called it AI slop.
Yikes. That's harsh.
No.
Really shows the level of disappointment.
But maybe the most specific, repeated criticism was about the actual gameplay, the combat.
What about it?
So many people, Puzzle-Headed Ad678, Gray Windows 7, Karthik Chandra 5v5, Crazy Parth YT just flat out said it was a copy of Sekiro,
A direct copy.
and a worse one, apparently. The parrying, the blocking animations, even some enemy designs like a mini-boss that looked like a tarot soldier. People felt the similarities were undeniable.
Man, Sekiro's combat is iconic. Copying it badly is not a good look.
Not at all. And Cyberboy07, the original poster, also pointed out the running animation looked like Black Myth Wukong.
So multiple comparisons to other highly regarded games.
Yeah, and others came up too. Ascaria mentioned EA Jedi games. Promifile saw bits of Lies of P, especially in the menus. This feeling of it being stitched together from other games was strong.
Not exactly the originality people were hoping for.
Far from it. And then there was just confusion about the world itself.
Confusion.
Yeah, Hamza Gamedev, Mars Shadows, Pankai 9869, they were all asking about the mix of weapons. Like you've got sword fighting, but then enemies have guns, and then a boss uses a traditional mace, a gada.
Huh. So swords versus guns versus mythology, that does sound a bit messy.
It felt incoherent to some. General Anakin 53 also thought the enemy designs themselves were inconsistent.
Okay, so visuals, combat, originality, world consistency. Quite a list. What about the timeline, that 8-month thing?
Yeah, that got questioned a lot. Can't believe you made it, Yashvo, and they were skeptical. Like, how do you make a AAA open-world game in 8 months? Especially your first big one.
It sounds incredibly ambitious, almost unrealistic.
Yashvon even doubted the claim it was already 70% done, given the scope.
Okay. Now, there was also some stuff about how the feedback was handled that sounded a bit concerning.
Right. This is where it gets potentially problematic. Allegations of deleting negative comments.
Oh, really? Who said that?
Cyberboy07 again. Hornimus, Jace Bodke, they all claimed critical comments were being removed or filtered by Varun Maya.
Oof, that never goes down well. If that's true, it really damages trust.
Hugely. You need that open dialogue, especially early on. Trying to silence criticism just makes things worse. People need to feel heard.
Absolutely. And then, well, there were some pretty personal comments aimed at Varun Maya, too.
Yeah, things got personal for some. Terms like tech bro scammer, grifter, impressive swan 5570, expensive village 49. Others used language like that.
Okay, so clearly some strong feelings there, maybe from past stuff.
It suggests some pre-existing skepticism,
Yeah.
maybe from his other online ventures.
So it's a pretty stark picture of disappointment and criticism overall. But was it all negative? Any other perspectives?
Well, if you look over at the RI India subreddit, the tone was maybe a bit more measured.
Okay, how so?
Almanam made a point of saying, hey, this is just a game. It's not really an AI tool, which seemed necessary given Maya's AI focus elsewhere, kind of reset expectations.
Managing expectations. Good point.
And Kobasama had a more, maybe, forgiving take, saying, look, even if it's not AAA, maybe it's a good first step, a learning experience for Indian dev.
A stepping stone idea. Yeah, that makes sense. It takes time to build capacity.
And Almanen also mentioned being initially hopeful because Maya's previous projects had apparently delivered.
Oh, interesting. So there was a track record that built some initial goodwill.
Seems like it, yeah. Which probably contributed to the anticipation in the first place.
Okay, that adds some context. Now, what about those WhatsApp audios? That felt more like insider thinking.
All right, that was fascinating. The speaker, talking in Malayalam, had some nuanced thoughts. They started by saying, look, Varun Maya is a gamer. He probably gets what makes a good game tick.
So, acknowledging he has some passion, some understanding.
But then they immediately pointed out how the pitch, the marketing, really hammered on graphics and assets.
Okay.
The speaker's theory was Maya probably knew those weren't actually revolutionary, but he focused on them anyway.
Why? Why focus on visuals if they aren't top tier.
The audio suggests it was strategic. Visuals are easy to show, easy for anyone to grasp. Maybe the core gameplay, the originality, maybe those weren't the strong points to pitch.
Huh. So, highlight what looks superficially good.
That was the implication, that the graphics were only appealing on the surface, understandable by a common person, was the phrase used. Most of the effort seemed to be in the assets. Story got a quick mention, but not much focus.
So the deeper stuff, maybe not emphasized.
And then the speaker got more critical in the audio. Said flat out the graphics aren't standard setting. That even a beginner would see they're not good.
Directly contradicting the marketing hype.
Yeah, and they went further. Said the graphics weren't even up to what a 5-year-old might expect.
Wow, that's pretty rough.
It is. And then came this theory about the strategy.
Go on.
The speaker suggested Maya probably expected a negative reaction, a backfire.
Expected it. Why release it then?
The idea was he targeted his own fan base first. Get them on board, secure that core support group who might be more forgiving.
Okay. Build a base first.
And then, and this is the really cynical part, the speaker suggested the wider backlash. Maybe that was part of the plan.
Part of the plan, like bad publicity is still publicity.
Kind of. Generate buzz, get attention, even if it's negative. It's a theory, but a pretty provocative one.
Definitely provocative. Suggests a very calculated approach.
It does. Leveraging that existing audience loyalty very deliberately.
Okay, so we've covered the main criticisms, the slightly different take from RA India, these behind-the-scenes thoughts. But back on Indian gaming, were there any positive voices? Any hope?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It wasn't universally negative. You had users like Ditpo94, Spherical Pride 6948, or Dopamine. They were saying, hey, maybe this is a first try.
Yeah.
Something others can learn from.
Seeing it as a learning opportunity.
Exactly. Acknowledging the effort, even if the result wasn't perfect.
And some people wanted to wait and see, right?
Yeah, Kurtaraj and Dastras were like, let's hold off judging until the full game is out. It's still early days.
That's fair. Demos aren't always representative.
Dastras also made the point about comparisons like, is it really fair to stack up a first attempt against huge established games like RDR2 or Black Myth? Probably not.
Good point. And what about the gameplay versus graphics debate? Did that come up in the positive comments too?
Definitely. S4DHU, Mr. L0B0, they repeated that core idea. Gameplay matters most. Maybe focusing too much on shiny visuals hurt the actual game feel.
The fundamentals need to be strong.
Right. And this led to a really strong consensus, actually. People like Super Hakerman, Right Delay 3503, Burning Skull 117, so many others.
What was the consensus?
That maybe Indian devs should focus on smaller, polished indie games first.
Start smaller, but make it great.
Exactly. With limited resources, it's maybe more realistic to nail a smaller, focused experience than to attempt a huge open world that ends up feeling unfinished or janky.
Makes a lot of sense. Did they mention any examples?
They did. Games like Raji, Fears to Fathom, Schedule 1, Ghost Yantra, Keybound, these were seen as the right direction. Focus on cool ideas, solid mechanics, not just chasing AAA graphics.
So highlighting existing or upcoming indie successes.
Yeah. And Black Phoenix X20 brought up the ecosystem challenges. Again, lack of support, funding issues, which makes big AAA projects even tougher. They suggested crowdfunding could be a way forward for indies.
Get community backing early on.
And get feedback, too. And again, Agrame Inc., Autopatronus 9965 reiterated, prioritize gameplay, original stories, not just another AAA quality GTA India crap.
That phrase, again, seems like people really want something unique.
They do. And Crimson Hunter pointed out, India has this incredible wealth of mythology and stories. Use that uniquely. Don't just copy Western templates.
Leverage local culture creatively. Yeah,
So lots of different threads there.
definitely. So bringing it all together then, for everyone listening, what are the big takeaways from this whole Project 11A reaction?
Well, first off, the reveal clearly didn't land as hoped for many. There's significant disappointment in the Indian gaming community.
Right, based on technical worries, the originality concerns, the whole ambition versus resources thing.
Exactly, and that leads to the second point. There's a real hunger for games with solid gameplay and unique ideas. Maybe smaller scale, maybe indie, but well executed. Chasing AAA visuals first seems less desired.
And this whole episode kind of shines a light on the broader challenges, doesn't it? Funding, talent, meeting those global standards.
It really does. The pressure is immense, and the comparisons will always be there. But takeaway 4, despite the criticism, some do see this as a learning step. Maybe a stumble, but a step forward potentially for the whole scene.
A bumpy start, but maybe necessary.
Perhaps. And finally, the way the game was presented, and especially those allegations about handling feedback. That really matters. Transparency, engaging with the community. Honestly, that's crucial.
Couldn't agree more. Build trust.
Yeah.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we saw this big vision for Project 11A meet some pretty sharp, critical feedback right out of the gate.
And it definitely sparks bigger thoughts, doesn't it? About creating things in emerging markets, balancing that ambition with what's actually doable, and just how vital community feedback really is.
It really does. Which leaves us with a question, I guess. What actually makes a game successful, especially in a place like the Indian gaming scene that's still growing?
Is it the tech, the visuals, the sales, the art?
Or something else entirely?
Yeah.
And how much do player expectations and how developers talk to their players shape that definition? Definitely some food for thought there.